This is Jacob's big day. 15 years old. See how it goes. Hey.
For about 2 minutes,
okay.
And then you can go ahead and do your speech.
Sounds good.
And then whenever you're done, I will go back up there and be like, we're going to take time for a Q&A.
Okay, good.
And then when there's 5 minutes left, Father Fitzgerald will probably give you a 5-minute warning. Okay, good. So he'll just give you a cue.
Sounds good. I got it. Good fun.
Thank you for gathering in this way. I want to thank Jacob Wong for organizing our presentation today. I want to call Jacob up to introduce our speaker. I'm a sophomore here at St. Stephen's, and today we are fortunate enough to have Chancellor McRaven as our guest speaker. Chancellor McRaven, a retired U.S. Navy four-star admiral, leads one of the nation's largest and most respected systems of higher education, the University of Texas. As the Chief Executive Officer of the UT system, Chancellor McRaven oversees 14 institutions that educate 221,000 students and employ 20,000 faculty and more than 80,000 healthcare professionals, researchers, and staff. Since becoming Chancellor in January 2015, McRaven has recommitted the UT system and its institutions to improving the lives of Texans and people all over the world through education, research, and healthcare. Prior to becoming Chancellor, McRaven served as a Navy SEAL for 37 years and was the commander of the U.S. Special Operations Command, during which time he led 69,000 men and women and was responsible for conducting counterterrorism operations worldwide. In 2011, he committed Operation Neptune Spear, which resulted in the capture of Osama bin Laden. McRaven is also a recognized national authority on U.S. foreign policy and has advised Presidents George W. Bush and Barack Obama and other U.S. leaders on defense issues. Along with these amazing achievements, he has written multiple books, one of which is called Make Your Bed, a #1 New York Times bestseller. And in 2014, Chancellor McRaven gave a commencement speech at the University of Texas, which has accumulated over 7 million views on YouTube. His wife, Georgianne, has dedicated much of her career to playing a leadership role with military families and wounded warriors. McRaven has been recognized for his leadership numerous times by national and international publications and organizations. He is a true American hero, so please give a warm welcome to Chancellor.
Okay, you can take out terrorists, but you can't figure out how to turn on the microphone. Test, test. Test, test. All right, good. Well, first, thanks, Jacob, very much for the invitation to come here. And let me first start with an apology, which I never like to do. You may hear I've got a little bit of a gravelly voice. I've been fighting the cedar fever, so if I have to pause every once in a while to get a drink, please bear with me. Jacob had given me a list of questions that he wanted me to address in my remarks. And what I thought I'd do is kind of take you through a little bit of my life chronologically and try to address those questions as I go through, and then we're going to have a Q&A period after this. So I grew up not far from here, down in San Antonio, Texas. My father was an Air Force officer. He was a fighter pilot in World War II in Korea. Retired from the Air Force in 1967. We moved from Lackland Air Force Base on the far side of San Antonio over to Windcrest, which was a small middle-class neighborhood on the northeast side. My mother had been a school teacher. She was born and raised here in Texas, so she was a true Texan. My father was a transplant. As they say, he got here as fast as he could. And like a lot of things in life, you are influenced by your parents, and I certainly was. My father was an incredible athlete. He had played professional football for then the Cleveland Rams back in 1939 and 40. When he saw war on the horizon, he and 5 other players left the football team and traveled to California and signed up to be part of the Army Air Corps. and then went off and fought World War II. My grandfather, his father, had been a doctor in both World War I and World War II, so we come from a line of military officers. Again, my mother was a school teacher raised in East Texas and had these kind of core values that I think you saw from the adults that were part of the greatest generation, as we referred to them. So in high school, I was pretty small. In fact, I was all of about 5'2". I'm now 6'2", so I grew a little bit in high school. But because my father had played football, I decided I wanted to go out and play football. That's probably not a good thing to do when you're 5'2" and weigh less than 100 pounds. But football, like a lot of sports, taught me the sort of things that you learn later on in life. And I don't care whether it's football or lacrosse or soccer. It is great to be involved in a team sport. It is great to kind of have the discipline that comes along with being an athlete. It is great to test yourself on the field of play. So all of these things were kind of part and parcel to my upbringing. I mean, I would say I kind of had the classic upbringing of a kid in the 60s and 70s, recognizing who my parents were. I'm often asked what made me decide to become a Navy SEAL. So I will take you back. In 1970, there was a movie called The Green Beret. And the Army Green Beret were the elite special forces. And the movie The Green Beret starred one of the great actors of the time, John Wayne. And growing up as a kid, again, influenced by my parents, by the movies I watched, by the people I interacted with, recognizing that the people of my parents' generation were all veterans of World War II and Korea and had a certain esprit de corps about them and a certain sense of adventure about them. So I saw the movie The Green Beret, and I thought, Green Beret, I think that's probably what I want to be. Well, one day, my sister, so this was in about 1971, I think, 71 or 72, my sister was dating an Army Green Beret. And uncharacteristically, back in the 70s, the Army officers, because the Vietnam War was going on, they were told not to wear their uniform off base. But in fact, this young Army captain showed up at our house, and he was in his Class A's, his very nice kind of dress uniform, and had his kind of green beret on. And of course, when I opened the door, I was just like, that's Army Green Beret. And of course, my sister, who was characteristically late getting for a date, was still doing whatever young ladies do to prepare for a date. So I had to entertain the Army captain. And in the course of entertaining him, he said, hey, are you thinking about going to college? I said, yeah. And I said, my mother's trying to give me a Navy ROTC scholarship. And he said, Navy? Well, then you ought to go be a Navy SEAL. I'd never heard of Navy SEAL. It's hard to believe that back in 1970, there were no movies, there were no books. So I had an Army Green Beret telling me to be a Navy SEAL. I thought that was a pretty good testimonial. So I looked into the Navy SEALs. There was only one article on them. It's called The Men with Green Faces. And it was about the SEALs in Vietnam. And I decided at that point in time that is exactly what I wanted to do. So after high school, I went to the University of Texas here. I was part of the Naval ROTC program. And I did run track for a while. Actually, let's call it that. I was on the track team. In fact, when I became the Chancellor, it was amazing how quickly they wanted to bring me into the Track Alumni Association. I said, you do realize that I always sat on the bench. I really wasn't good enough to compete in any of the events, but I did really enjoy being part of the track team. But they were happy to have me as part of the Alumni Association. But I'll tell you, as I got to the University of Texas, you learn a lot of things going to college. And one of the questions Jacob asked me about was, one, what would I have told myself as I was preparing for college? What are the sort of things that I should tell you? I said, well, one, your parents are always going to encourage you. My mother wanted me to be a doctor. That lasted about half a semester. When I realized I wasn't any good in biology and math and those sort of things, I decided to go into business. That didn't go too well either. But what I found was I could write. Excuse me. I found I could write. And so I went into something that I enjoyed doing. And so I think as you begin to look at your college career, you have to do something that you're going to be passionate about. You'll be able to do a lot of things. I mean, you're all smart young men and women. You'll be able to do whatever you want to do in college, whatever field you want to go into. But I would encourage you to do something that really inspires you and that is good for society. So when you look back and you say, you know, a lot of people ask, well, should I tell kids to go into the military? I mean, that's going to be your choice. Military for me was a great adventure. Every day was something new. You know, you're Navy SEALs, you're jumping, you're diving, you're blowing things up, you know, you're doing all sorts of fun things. But it's not for everybody. The military is not for everybody. What I would tell you is do something that inspires you. Do something that does good for the world. If you do that, you're going to be happy, your parents are going to be proud of you, and you'll contribute to the society. So as I went through 4 years of school, again, I changed majors 4 times. That's not something you should do, by the way. You know, find something that works for you. But again, I kind of went through this evolution of trying to learn what I wanted to do. I tell folks today that when our kids come to the University of Texas, there's 3 things that I hope that they learn while they're at the University of Texas, and it's kind of the 3 Ds. I said, one, you ought to discover something. Discover new ideas, discover new people, you know, discover what life is about, because you're going to have an opportunity in 4 years or 6 years to do that in a way that you'll never get anywhere else. That's what the university is about. I've always been in favor of online curriculums. I think those are great for people who can't get to a college campus. But being on a college campus and learning at a university is a lot more than what you're going to learn in the classroom. It's about dealing with your roommate. It's about dealing with your girlfriend, your boyfriend. It's about dealing with a faculty member. It's about standing in lines for ads and drops. It's about failing a test and learning how to get back up on the horse and do it again. This is what life is going to be like, and you're going to have an opportunity when you go to college to do just that. Learn how to deal with life in an environment that allows you to fail and allows you to learn from your mistakes. So the first D is discovery. The second D, I'm really okay, believe me. The second D is to debate. I think it's a lost art today, is how do we debate? Unfortunately, when you watch the media today, all you see is people kind of yelling back and forth at each other. I think it is important for any student, any person, to learn how to argue their point in a very civil fashion. It doesn't mean you have to be part of the debate team. All I'm saying is part of what a classroom environment brings you is how do you make your argument? How do you make your argument in a way that, again, is logical, is civil, and has power to it? And then the other part of this is how do you dissent when your argument doesn't win the day? I think whether you like their approach or not, you have to be impressed with the kids at Parkland, at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, who pulled together and marched on Tallahassee, marched on Washington, D.C., in order to have their voices heard. They did so in a lawful, civil, civic manner. This is incredibly impressive. I mean, I can tell you back in the 60s and the 70s, dissent didn't look like that. It was a lot more violent. It was a lot more unconstrained. So part of what you always have to learn, I think, and it's an important thing for every civilian, every citizen of the United States to understand that they have a right to dissent, but they have a responsibility to dissent when things really don't seem appropriate. But you have to do so in a manner that is befitting being a citizen of the United States. So if you come to one of our universities, hopefully you'll discover something new people, new ideas, new approaches to life. You'll learn to debate. You'll learn to make your argument worthwhile, reasonable. And then if everything falls apart, then you'll learn how to dissent in a manner that is appropriate. So I probably only learned one of those 3 things when I was at UT, and that was discovery. I discovered an awful lot about myself, about people that were around me. But it was a fabulous experience and something I wouldn't change for anything in the world. So I graduated from UT in 1977, and I went off to SEAL training right after college. So SEAL training is 6 months long. It's in Coronado, California, which normally is a resort town, except when you're going through SEAL training. And it's broken into 3 phases. So the first phase is it's kind of purely physical. I mean, your day is you get up at the crack of dawn. You'll start with an hour and a half of calisthenics. You'll finish that, and you're being harassed constantly by SEAL instructors. And when I went through training, my SEAL instructors were Vietnam veterans. So they knew how to harass you pretty well. So for an hour and a half, you do calisthenics. Then you run to chow. You run to the dining hall. You have like about 5 minutes to eat chow, and if you're one of the officers, you're at the last in line, because what you know as a leader is you let the troops go first. So you're the last in line, so you're lucky if you grab a donut or something, you run back, and then your day consists of one physical activity after the next. You'll come back and you'll have a long run, maybe a 4-mile soft sand run. You'll come back, you'll have about a half an hour, 45 minutes of a classroom to cool down. Then they'll send you on a 2-mile swim. Then you'll come back and maybe you'll run to lunch, and then you'll come back and you'll do an obstacle course. Then you'll have a 30-minute break for a classroom or something. And then you'll go do another physical activity. And then you'll come back and continue on. And if you have a bad day, if you really screw it up, and you're not able to meet the standards, then you have a circus. And a circus is another 2 hours after the training day is completed of more physical activity. And then in the 7th week of the first 9 or 10 weeks, you have what's referred to as Hell Week. And Hell Week is 6 days of no sleep and constant harassment by the instructors to see who really wants to be a Navy SEAL. Second phase, the physical training continues, the harassment continues, but you learn how to dive the scuba rig, the self-contained underwater breathing apparatus, and you learn how to dive some of our specialized rigs that have no bubbles. And then the last phase is referred to as land warfare training, or land warfare phase, and there you learn kind of basic infantry tactics, how to shoot, move, and communicate. You go out to San Clemente Island, which is an island about 80 miles off the coast of San Diego. You do some long swims. You've got a 6-mile swim out there. You've got a 16-mile run. You have, again, a lot more physical activity. And then after 6 months, you graduate from SEAL training. So that's basic SEAL training. I had the opportunity in 2014 to give the commencement speech, and I walked through kind of 10 lessons that I learned from SEAL training. And while I won't go through all of them, let me talk about just a few of them. So the first one was make your bed. And a lot of people have asked me why in the world did I come up with that as one of the first lessons. Well, first, when I wrote the speech, interestingly enough, I was actually writing another speech. I've been told that I've been invited to be the commencement speaker about 2 months out. Frankly, I didn't really get started working on the speech until about a month out. And Wednesday of the week that I was supposed to give the speech, so I was supposed to give the speech on Saturday, the commencement address. And on Wednesday, I had written my speech, and I realized it didn't work. I couldn't make the speech I was working on work. Good speeches have got to have a beginning, a middle, and end. They've got to have kind of moral value to them. I couldn't make it work. So I was a little bit in a panic mode. I'm about to talk to 30,000 people, 8,000 students and their families, and I thought, this is not really looking very good. So I went to my wife in a little bit of a panic, and she said, why don't you write about something you know? Oh, well, there's deep wisdom. Why don't you write about something you know? And I thought, well, I don't know. I mean, I'm going to go before this audience in a military uniform. I had not been back to the University of Texas at that time in 35 years. And I thought, how will they take a military officer? And why would they want to know about SEAL training? But I realized that SEAL training, that 6 months that we went through, has a lot to do with life. It's the same sort of things you're going to learn in life, except kind of compressed into 6 months. So I turned it into those lessons. And so when I looked at SEAL training, I kind of went chronologically. And the reason Make Your Bed was first was because it was one of the first things that we learned as SEAL trainees. Because every day, before you would do your physical training in the morning, and then you would immediately go and you would have to have a uniform inspection. So your uniform had to be perfect, but your bed was there. And you lived in a barracks, and every day you had to make your bed. And you had to make your bed according to Navy standards. These exacting standards. And the pillow had to be, right in the middle of the headboard. You had to have the second blanket had to be folded in a perfect rectangle at the base of the bed. You had to have hospital corners, which were 45-degree angles. The sheets had to be tucked perfectly. And then the instructor would come by, and after they inspected your uniform, they would look at your bed. And invariably, one of the instructors would pull out a quarter or something out of his pocket, flip it into the air, and see whether or not you had pulled those sheets taut enough so that that quarter would balance. That was the standard. And I thought, I came here to be a Navy SEAL. I didn't come here to learn to make my bed. I said, what is the point of teaching us and expecting us to make our bed? And I remember at one point in time, an instructor, when I was probably mouthing off a little too much, pulled me aside and said, well, let me explain to you. And he was a Vietnam veteran, had a Silver Star for valor. And he said, look, if you get up every morning and you accomplish one task of the day, something as simple as making your bed, then that will encourage you to do another task, and then another, and then another. And then by the end of the day, you'll have accomplished a lot of tasks because you started the day with the task completed. He said, but the other part of this is, if you can't do the small things, if you can't do the little things right in life, if you can't even make your bed, how are you ever going to run a complex SEAL mission? So show us you can make your bed well, and then we'll have confidence in you that you can do something bigger, like run a SEAL mission. And I never forgot that. And of course, if you spend any time in the military, you know that making your bed is part of a daily routine. It is what gives you a little bit of order. It is, and particularly in a chaotic environment. I tell folks when I was in combat in Iraq and Afghanistan, about the only thing I seemed to control was that bed. I would wake up every morning, I would make my bed, and then I would have to go off, and bad things happen in combat. Kids die in combat, civilians are unfortunately killed in combat. People are yelling and screaming at you. There is always something that is part of the chaos of combat. But when I came home at night, back to my little room, there was my bed. And it gave you some sense of solace. It gave you some sense of comfort that there was something in your life you controlled. The bed was very important, not just a metaphor, but something physically that you can do that helped your life out. I guess the next lesson that I think is extremely important is really about this idea that you need other people in your life. When we go through SEAL training, we carry around this thing called an inflatable boat small, an IBS. It's a raft, it's a rubber raft, about 8 feet long, requires 7 guys to carry it. It's got little rubber straps on it, so you have 2 men, one on the right, one on the left, in the front, 2 men in the middle, 2 men in the back, and then the officer is referred to as the captain. He's the guy that steers the boat. But very early on in SEAL training, the instructors give you a very simple task. They just want you to paddle out to the surf, and then paddle a couple miles down the beach, and then paddle back in. So, that seems pretty simple. But what it means is you've got to get everybody working together. Everybody on that boat has got to hop in the boat at the right time. So you normally, as you're coming into the surf zone, the number 1 guys pull the boat into the surf. The number 2 guys, they stabilize the boat so it doesn't move left or right. Number 3 guys, they're behind pushing. And then the officer jumps in, puts his oar in the water, and everybody hops in at the same time, and he yells a stroke count. And you realize that for you to get from point A to point B, everybody's got to help. Everybody's got to be part of that team. And again, I think it's part of life. What you realize is, particularly as a Navy SEAL, I don't care how big, I don't care how strong, I don't care how tough you are, you can't do a combat mission by yourself. You have to have other people to help you. And it's the same thing in life. I don't care how smart you are, I don't care how accomplished you are, you have to have other people help you in life. And so the idea is make friends. Find somebody to share your life with. You're going to have to rely on other people, and other people are going to have to rely on you. And you learn that coming and going in SEAL training. In these boat crews, when we went through SEAL training, they're actually aligned by height. So I was one of the taller guys, I'm 6'2". But we had the little guys. And of course, the big guys, we used to make kind of good-natured fun of the little guys. And the little guys we called the Munchkin crew. And this was from a movie called The Wizard of Oz. So The Wizard of Oz, again, before y'all's time, but in The Wizard of Oz, they had these little munchkins, and they were actually winged creatures. So the little Munchkin crew, these guys weren't probably, I don't think anybody was above 5'5". But the interesting thing about the Munchkin crew was that they came from kind of all corners of the world and the States. We had a French American, an African American, a Greek American, a Native American, who actually now works for me down in San Antonio, and actually the African American, Marcus Wynn, was from Tyler, Texas, and then a couple of tough kids from the Midwest. And these guys would outswim, they would out-paddle, they would out-hustle everybody. And you realize very quickly that, life and success in life has absolutely nothing to do with your color, with your background, with your economic background, with, where you came from, none of that. It only matters kind of what's in here, what's in your heart, what's your drive. Your will to succeed is really all that matters in life. And so let anybody tell you different. And you find this out when you see this boat crew of the smallest guys in SEAL training from every corner of the states in the world outperforming everybody else. And very quickly you understand what's important in life, and that's just your will to succeed, your will to work hard. And the last one I guess I would say is in SEAL training we have the bell. And the bell is a brass bell. It's about this big. and it sits in the corner of the compound. The compound is where we do all of our physical training. And in the compound, if you want to quit SEAL training, if you want to stop getting up at the crack of dawn, if you want to stop doing the long runs, if you want to stop doing the swims, if you want to stop doing all the hard stuff, all you have to do is go ring the bell 3 times. You just grab the little placard and you ring the bell, bang, 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 3 times and you're out. That's all there is. No questions asked. That's the easy part of life. It is easy when times get tough to go ring the bell. And the one thing that SEAL training teaches you is, life isn't always about, again, who's the biggest, who's the strongest, who's the toughest. It's who has the will to persevere. Who's going to not ring the bell? So if I could offer you one other thing from SEAL training, it was, again, you're going to find that life is tough sometimes. You're going to fail, you're going to make mistakes. It's going to look like there are dark clouds hanging over you. You just don't give up. You just continue to pursue your dreams, continue to fight through it. I guarantee you on the other end, it may not be exactly what you were chasing, but it'll be better than where you'd be if you rang the bell. So I spent 37 years after that in the Navy. And I can tell you, again, every day was an adventure. Part of being a Navy SEAL, you don't give it a lot of thought, it's just who you are. An average week for us, we would do static line and free fall parachute jumps. We were locking out of submarines off the coast of San Diego or Little Creek, Virginia. We were doing demolition training, weapons training. When combat finally came after 9/11, you're in a combat environment every day. Not just in Iraq and Afghanistan, but the nature of our business was all around the world. You have an opportunity to meet great people. I think the thing you find out, I've been to 90 countries around the world. And that's a lot of places. And you find that people are basically the same. People want the best for their kids. Parents want their kids, I don't care whether they're Afghans or Iraqis or Yemenis or Somalis, they want their kids to grow up well. They want to live in peace. They want a good life for themselves. They smile and they're happy to frown when they're upset. This is human nature. And I got to tell you, you find that people all around the world are good. You just have to go sometimes searching for the goodness in them. But my time in the Navy was great. I had an opportunity, of course, at the end of my career, as I was getting ready to retire, I had somebody from the University of Texas come approach me and said, would you be interested in this job as the Chancellor of the University of Texas? After we went through a number of things, I finally had to say, okay, what's the Chancellor? I didn't know. I said, when I went to the University of Texas, I knew who my RA was, my resident assistant. I didn't know who the president of the university was. I didn't care about the president of the university. What student cares about the president of the university? I guess those on the student council do, but I can tell you that I wasn't somebody I worried about. I didn't even know we had a chancellor when I was at the University of Texas. So I kind of had to get a sense for what that meant. And as Jacob said in his introduction, the University of Texas system, so when you look at the University of Texas, I'm essentially the CEO, the Chief Executive Officer, above the 14 institutions. So we have 8 academic institutions. That includes, obviously, our flagship university here at Austin. But we have great institutions in San Antonio, Tyler, El Paso, Rio Grande Valley, Permian Basin. And then we have a number of health institutions. We have 6 health institutions, 6 medical schools. We have hundreds of hospital affiliations, so it's a remarkable job. And I'm often asked about really kind of what inspires me every day as the chancellor. And I will tell you, it's the same thing that inspired me when I was an admiral in the Navy, or an ensign in the Navy. And it was the troops, for lack of a better word. It is the students. That's what inspires you as a chancellor when you have an opportunity to go meet these young men and women that are, particularly the ones that are first in family, those that are coming from the Rio Grande Valley or El Paso or San Antonio or Permian Basin, they're the first in their family to go to college. And what you realize is when you are the first in your family to go to college, you are about to change the entire trajectory of not only your life, but your kid's life and your children's life and your family's life forever. Because by getting a bachelor's degree, statistically, it makes everything about your life better. And again, your kid's life and theirs and theirs and theirs. And so when you see that you can provide opportunity to people, that's the most inspiring thing you can do as a chancellor. So I think with that, let me pause and open it up into questions. And if you don't raise your hand, I'm going to pick you out of the crowd. So if you're wearing like a red shirt, that's probably what I'm going to look like. But so let's fire away with some questions here. All right, nobody's taking it, so what's your question? Of what was the inspiration to make the book, Make Your Bed? The question was, what was the inspiration for Make Your Bed? Right after I gave the speech, I had a lot of people come ask me if I would turn it into a book, and I declined initially. What happened, though, was I had an opportunity to see people every day, and they were always asking me, who inspired you? So if they liked the commencement speech, that was great, but who was it that inspired me? So if you read the book, every chapter is about somebody that really inspired me. Moki Martin I talked about. So Moki Martin, Lieutenant Philip L. Moki Martin. Moki was a Navy SEAL, Vietnam-era Navy SEAL, Hawaiian by birth. He was a remarkable guy. I mean, he was one of the best parachutists, one of the best scuba divers, one of the best weapons experts, and he was on the very beginning of the triathlon surge. And unfortunately got in a bicycle accident. Had a head-on bicycle accident that left him paralyzed from the neck down. You'd think, my goodness, how did he carry on after that? Except I've told people before, Moki Martin did more from a wheelchair than 10 men standing erect. I mean, he went on he became an accomplished painter. He continued to be involved in triathlon. He fathered a child, a beautiful daughter. I mean, he continued on with his life, even though, most people would have just said, how can I continue? I mean, he had been a Navy SEAL, top-notch Navy SEAL, and now he's paralyzed in a wheelchair for the rest of his life. And yet he's done more from that wheelchair. That's inspiration. So I realized that there was an opportunity to tell people about people that have inspired me, and that's why I wrote the book. Other questions? Yes, sir.
What do you think of the walkout in March tomorrow? Do you think that's good civil disobedience?
Yeah, I mean, I won't comment on the goodness or the badness of civil disobedience, other than to say, I think civil disobedience is always important. I mean, that is what makes us who we are. If the first part of it is the important part, civil disobedience. I mean, this is why we are the United States of America. So, yes, I think anybody that feels like they have a concern about whatever's going on, whether it's gun violence or whether it's sexual assault or you pick something, people ought to feel empowered to stand up, but do so in a way that is, again, civil and lawful. Because frankly, that's really what will get your message across more than if all of a sudden people are out there, swinging clubs and being uncivil and inappropriate. That doesn't get the message across. So again, I'm a big believer in civil disobedience, but with the importance on the word civil. Yes, sir.
So 30 plus years in the Navy, that's your whole life. How was the transition into civilian life?
Yeah, so the question was, after all that time in the Navy, how was my transition to civilian life? Well, the hard part is trying to figure out what color of tie to wear. Because, I have the same uniform that I can put on every day, essentially. Surprisingly enough, the transition, certainly to this job, has not been as stark as people would think. I spent most of my adult life running large organizations. So running another large organization is, again, it's all about the people. I mean, the things you learn in leadership are the fact that you have to rely on people. You have to trust the people you hire good people, hold them accountable, but you have to rely on them. So in my case, when I was in the military, my staffs, I'm not a helicopter pilot, but I have a helicopter pilot on my staff. I'm not a surgeon, but I have a command surgeon on my staff. I'm not a supply officer, but I have a supply officer on my staff. Well, same way here. I mean, I came into this job, I don't have any fancy initials beside my name, other than retired. But I have PhDs and MDs that work for me, and they are remarkable men and women. So you have to rely on them. You have to hold them accountable. The other thing, though, that I had to do was I had to understand the business of higher education and healthcare. So whenever you go into a new organization, and I think it was interesting when I was coming to this job, the woman who would later go on to be my executive director, I didn't know her at the time. I think it was like July of 2014, and I came to Austin. And they were about to anoint me as the new chancellor. And her name is Janet Pankratz. And I said, well, Janet, are people concerned about me coming to be the chancellor? She kind of shuffled a little bit. She said, no, they're a little bit anxious. I said, well, what are they anxious about? She said, well, every new chancellor comes in, brings their people with them. I said, yeah, I don't have any people. You are my people. I said, I'm going to keep the same people here. And she said, well, yeah, but you're coming from a military background. And I said, look, we are not going to be marching around and saluting. So I am going to adjust to this organization. And then after I adjust to it, after I learn the language, so I had to learn, what does a chair do? What does a provost do? What does a dean do? How does the tender process work? How does formula funding work? How does higher education work? How does healthcare work? I didn't know any of those things. You have to learn them. If you're going to lead, I don't care whether you're the lowest level office manager or whether you're the CEO, you have to learn the organization. You have to learn the business. And then you have to be a team player. And all those skills went very well from the military to this job as a chancellor. Yes, in the back.
What was your most exciting mission?
The most exciting mission, Cecile. Well, they were all pretty exciting. Obviously the Bin Laden raid gets a lot of press. Unfortunately, the really exciting missions I'm probably not at liberty to talk about. What I tell you though is the best thing about any SEAL mission is when you get the boys back safely. And the thing about the Bin Laden mission is it was going on. Obviously, we had the helicopter go down the compound. I knew pretty quickly that the boys were okay because I'm watching, I'm listening to them. So I wasn't concerned at that point in time. But frankly, getting Bin Laden was important. That was the mission. But when we all got back across to the Afghan border and everybody was safe, and we only had one dead person on the helicopter, and that was the bad guy. That's a feeling of success, and unfortunately in the nature of combat, that wasn't always the case. I lost over 300 guys in 6 years, and that was just within the special operations community. So that's a lot of people, and that doesn't include the number that were injured, wounded, seriously wounded. But what you learn in combat, I think is true of any place else, is the real leaders, you've got to work through the tough times. We've had helicopters crash and kill people. We've had people killed on target. You have to pay your respects, and then you have to find out what went wrong. You have to learn from your mistakes, and then you've got to be prepared to make the next tough decision. Because as a leader, if you can't make the next tough decision, you're probably not going to be a very good leader. So every mission was exciting, but the ones where the guys came back, that was the best of all. Yes. I'm sorry, I can't hear you. How often was the bell rung? Well, okay. So our class started with 155, and we ended up at 33. And actually, that was a large class. Normally, the classes, we had 4 officers, 4 good officers, I like to think, that kind of kept the team together. But normally, they start with about 150 or thereabouts, and end up with about 20. So that's kind of a standard profile for SEAL training. And the statistics tell you that the enlisted guys, their dropout rate is 75%, the officers is about 50%. Come over here. Questions over on this side? Yes, ma'am, in the back.
Do you still write? If so, what do you write about?
Do I still write? And if so, what do I write about? Actually, I am. I'm writing another book. I like to write. I like the art of writing, the craft of writing. This one happens to be a memoir that probably won't come out until March or April. Telling some of the stories of my life, if anybody happens to find them interesting. Each story, though, to me is fun to write because I'm trying to make sure that there is a moral to the end of the story. This is not a kiss and tell. This is not a let's go slam people. This is really about what did I learn from my mistakes, a little bit of kind of make your bed, what did I learn from the people that inspired me, but it's a little bit long of a book. So yeah, I enjoy writing. And I think anytime you can have something that you enjoy doing, it's always worth pursuing. Yes, ma'am. So I graduated from Theodore Roosevelt in San Antonio, Northeast District. Oh yes, the question was, have I done PS? Absolutely. San Antonio is a military city, USA, and I don't know when they actually coined that term, but I can tell you, growing up there in the 60s and 70s, the city of San Antonio really embraced the military in a way that made us feel, very, very welcome. And my father and my mother loved Fiesta. They like party. I mean, when you look at San Antonio, you've got kind of German culture, you've got Hispanic culture, it's a great town to party. Yes, ma'am. Oh, that's a loaded question. The question was if I had to change the branch of military to go into another one, what would I go into? Well, I always told folks if I couldn't be a Navy SEAL, I would have liked to have been an Army helicopter pilot. I spent a lot of time in helicopters. There was a little helicopter we referred to as the little bird. And the cockpit's probably only about this big, but it's a highly maneuverable helicopter. And I had a chance to fly it sitting in the right seat sometimes. And that's just a lot of fun. So I think probably an Army helicopter pilot. But don't tell my Marine friends or my Air Force friends. Yes, sir.
How long were you active doing like hands-on missions?
Yeah, pretty much till probably about the last 3 years. So the question was how hands-on was I? So, and it's a great question because it's an interesting thing about the career field I was in. So for most of my career, up to 9/11, you're very active. I'm a young ensign and then a lieutenant junior grade, then a lieutenant. As a lieutenant commander and then a commander, I went out on Desert Shield and Desert Storm. As a commander, I was in charge of a SEAL Team 3, and so you're not the guy breaking down the door, but you're the guy now kind of in charge of the guy breaking down the door, if you will. And then as a Navy captain, I was in charge of all the SEALs on the West Coast. And then when I became a flag officer, this is after 9/11, became an admiral after 9/11. Now you're in Iraq and Afghanistan. And again, I would go out on missions about a couple times a month. I wasn't in charge of the mission. But one of the things you learn as a leader is you've got to kind of share the hardships with the troops. If they think all you're doing is sitting in your office drinking coffee, it's going to be hard to earn their respect. So you have to go out with them. You've got to share the hardships. You've got to share the dangers. They've got to see that you understand how tough their life is. And it also allows you to make better decisions. The time when it really dropped off when I became a 4-star admiral, now it was really an administrative job. I was in charge of all the special operations, but you don't really get as much hands-on as from 3-star on down. So, for probably 34 of the 37 years, it was pretty hands-on. Okay.
3 minutes.
I'm getting the hook here. So close to 3-minute hook. Yes, ma'am.
In your experience as a leader, what are the most important characteristics that separate leaders from followers?
Great question. One of the most important characteristics that separate leaders from followers. So there's a great quote by Pope Francis, and he says, "A shepherd should smell like his sheep." I love that. A shepherd should smell like his sheep. And the point there is if you're going to lead, you need to understand the people that you're leading. One of the great things that the Navy does, when I was a midshipman here at the University of Texas, in between your freshman and sophomore year, you go on what is euphemistically called cruise. But as a budding officer, they make you an enlisted man. So for 9 weeks, I spent time on a fast frigate, a pointy-nose ship, off Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, and I was an enlisted guy. And so you're scrubbing the decks, you're cleaning the heads, the latrines, you're working in the boiler room where it's 120 degrees. You learn the life of an enlisted man. That allows you as an officer to understand that the decisions you make have consequences. You always have to keep a certain amount of professional distance. So the one to kind of get to the point of your question. We talk about professional distance in the military. If your professional distance gets too far, if you're the admiral that is making decisions and you don't really understand the ramifications of the decisions, you're not going to be a good decision maker. If you're too close to the troops and you can't make a tough decision because you're afraid for their welfare in combat, you're not going to make a good decision. You've got to find that balance between being too far away where you're sitting in your office with coffee and you're just kind of making decisions on the big map, and being too close where you're always worried about their safety. So understanding the consequences of your decisions is critical for any leader. Time for one more? Jay.
Sure, why not?
Sure. Yes, ma'am. Right here. Last question.
Okay, so when you were in the Army, everyone wears the same, how everything's in unison,
Yeah.
the same outfit, and all doing the same stuff. Did you ever feel how did you keep, just
No.
Like
So,
individuality
yeah.
and like everyone being different.
So I think this is a misperception about the military, is that because we all wear the same uniform, we all have kind of the same haircut, we all kind of march in line, that we're all the same. Absolutely not the case. In fact, it was back to how did my transition go from the military to higher education. People said, well, you know, how are you going to be able to work with those faculty? You know, I mean, when you were in the military, you gave people an order and they just did what you said. Well, then you never spent a day in the military, because you don't just give orders. One, I'm not sure I ever gave an order in my time in the military. You make decisions, but you don't give orders. You have to take a look at everything. And so you understand that when you're looking at 50 guys in a room, or 50 men and women in a room, they all have different ideas. They all have different thoughts. You've got to, again, I always went out and pulsed them and said, what do you think about this? What do you think about this plan? The only thing that's different is, once we decide, this is the direction we're going, and I make the decision, this is where we're heading, then everybody gets on board. But I gotta tell you, in the special operations community, before that, everybody who has an individual opinion, you want those opinions. That's gonna make your decision as an officer better if you get those opinions. That individuality matters. And I think it is the strength of the military, is that we can take advantage of people's individuality, again, because the military, they come from all walks of life. Rich kids, poor kids, black kids, white kids, foreigners, and American citizens, all walks of life. That's the strength of any organization, is the diversity, and then you mold that diversity to a common goal. And our common goal was taking care of America. Well, again, Jacob, thank you very much. Great to be here today.
Thank you again, Jacob. Thank you again, Chancellor McRaven. Go to class.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I know my dad was so fun to come down. Okay, nice to meet you.